On March 14, 1980, the world of sports was shaken to its core by a tragedy that claimed the lives of an entire generation of aspiring boxing champions. A Polish IL-62 jetliner operated by LOT Polish Airlines crashed near Warsaw's Okęcie airport, just half a mile short of its destination. Among the 77 individuals who perished in the disaster were 22 members of the United States amateur boxing team. These young athletes, many of whom were considered rising stars with the potential to make Olympic history, were en route to an international event that was to be held in Poland. The crash not only robbed American boxing of its promising future, but also cast a long shadow over international sporting relations and raised critical questions about aviation safety during that era. The flight had departed from New York's John F. Kennedy International Airport and was scheduled to make its final landing in Warsaw. It was a routine international flight, the kind undertaken countless times without incident. On board were passengers of various nationalities, including athletes, coaches, sports officials, and regular civilians. For the U.S. boxing team, the trip was seen as a valuable opportunity to compete on the international stage, build rapport with other amateur athletes, and prepare for potential Olympic contention. Spirits were high, and the team, composed of young fighters from across the United States, had trained tirelessly for the upcoming competition. Many of the athletes on board were between the ages of 17 and 23, brimming with ambition and talent. Among them was Lemuel Steeples, a light welterweight boxer from St. Louis who had recently won accolades in regional competitions. Also on the team was Byron Payton, a featherweight from Fort Worth, Texas, who had shown great promise in recent bouts and was considered one of the most technically gifted fighters of his weight class. Another was David Rodriguez of Colorado Springs, known for his aggressive style and relentless work ethic. These names and others represented the heart and soul of American amateur boxing. They were more than just athletes. They were the future of a sport that had historically played a significant role in the country's Olympic success. The flight proceeded as planned for much of its transatlantic journey. As it approached Poland, weather conditions began to deteriorate. It was a typical March day in Eastern Europe: grey skies, cold air, and scattered showers. The crew of the IL-62 was composed of experienced Polish aviators who had operated this route numerous times. The IL-62 itself was a large four-engine long-range jet airliner developed by the Soviet Union, widely used by Eastern Bloc countries for long-distance travel. Although the aircraft had a serviceable safety record, it was known to have certain design limitations, particularly in engine performance and flight control systems, that required strict adherence to procedural discipline during approach and landing. As the aircraft prepared for final descent into Warsaw, it encountered mechanical problems that have been speculated upon but never fully detailed in publicly available accident investigations. Reports suggest that an engine failure or malfunction in the thrust reverser system may have contributed to the aircraft's inability to stabilize on approach. Witnesses on the ground reported hearing abnormal engine sounds and observing the aircraft descending at a steeper-than-usual angle. It has been suggested that the plane was attempting a go-around, a procedure in which a landing is aborted and the aircraft circles back for another attempt, when it suddenly lost altitude and crashed into a moat-like embankment less than a mile from the airport. The impact was catastrophic. The plane broke apart on contact with the ground, scattering debris over a wide area and igniting a massive fire fueled by jet fuel. Emergency responders rushed to the scene, but there were no survivors. The heat and intensity of the flames made rescue efforts almost impossible, and the twisted wreckage offered little hope for those who had perished. Polish authorities quickly secured the crash site and began a thorough investigation, but details surrounding the technical cause of the crash remained limited due to the political climate of the time and the state-controlled nature of information. Dissemination in Eastern Bloc countries, the news reached the United States with devastating speed. Families of the young athletes, many of whom had watched their sons train and dream of Olympic glory since childhood, were shattered. Communities across America mourned the loss of their hometown heroes. The amateur boxing community, already struggling for support and visibility, was dealt a crippling blow. Coaches, trainers, and sports officials spoke of the immense potential lost in a single instant, the loss of fighters who could have gone on to represent the United States at the highest levels of competition. The Olympic dreams of dozens were extinguished in the cold fields outside Warsaw. Tributes poured in from around the world. In Poland, a memorial service was held to honor all 77 victims, with special attention paid to the visiting American athletes. The Polish government expressed deep sorrow for the incident and cooperated fully with American diplomatic efforts to recover the bodies and bring the remains of the athletes back to the United States. In American cities from St. Louis to Fort Worth, candlelight vigils, church services, and school assemblies were held to remember the young men who had boarded that flight with nothing but hope in their hearts. The crash was a defining moment for amateur sports in the United States. It raised concerns about the safety of international travel for athletes and highlighted the risks that come with global sports engagement, especially during politically tense times. In 1980, the Cold War still loomed large over every interaction between the East and West. Though this was not a politically motivated event, the tragedy underscored the fragility of human life against the backdrop of geopolitical complexity. The U.S. Olympic Committee faced renewed pressure to ensure the safety of all athletes traveling abroad, and discussions around insurance, emergency response protocols, and intergovernmental communication were intensified. In the months following the crash, efforts were made to honor the memory of those lost. The U.S. Amateur Boxing Federation established scholarships and training funds in the names of the fallen athletes. Commemorative plaques were placed in boxing gyms, schools, and community centers. Stories about the boxers' lives, their families, their dreams, and their accomplishments began to circulate widely. Journalists, biographers, and documentarians worked to preserve the memory of this lost generation of fighters. Their stories were told in magazines, local newspapers, and sports retrospectives, ensuring that their legacies would not be forgotten. Though the cause of the crash was never disclosed in full, it prompted aviation authorities in Poland and other Eastern Bloc nations to re-evaluate maintenance procedures and aircraft monitoring systems. The IL-62 aircraft, while not immediately grounded, underwent increased scrutiny. In the years that followed, modifications were introduced to improve safety standards. The international aviation community took note, as did American sports organizations, who became more selective about travel arrangements and destinations for amateur teams. The psychological toll on the families of the athletes was profound and lasting. Parents who had spent years supporting their children's boxing careers were left with grief that could not be eased by answers or compensation. Many of them established foundations or spoke publicly about their sons, turning their sorrow into advocacy for athlete safety. The tragedy also had a ripple effect through the boxing world. Trainers and peers of the deceased often mentioned how deeply affected they were by the event. Some retired from the sport altogether, while others dedicated their careers to mentoring young boxers with a renewed sense of purpose and responsibility. The memory of the crash became a touchstone in the culture of American amateur boxing. Each new generation of fighters was told the story of the 1980 team, not as a cautionary tale, but as a lesson in the fragility of life and the power of dreams. At national tournaments, moments of silence were observed. Gloves were raised in tribute every time a young boxer stepped into the ring, especially in international competitions. There was an unspoken connection to those who never had the chance to finish their journey. Over the decades, the crash of the Polish IL-62 near Warsaw faded from the headlines, but it never disappeared from the hearts of those who remembered. In boxing gyms across America, the names of those 22 athletes were spoken with reverence. They were not just victims of a tragedy, they were symbols of courage, determination, and the unyielding spirit of sport. Their story remains one of the most painful yet powerful chapters in the history of American athletics, a reminder of what was lost and what can still be built in their memory. If you found this story moving and want to learn more about forgotten tragedies and the lives behind them, make sure to share this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss an update.